If you've been feeling like 2023 might be your most challenging year for faith, you're not alone. Friends, we all have our own journey of faith. Many of us can see the writing on the wall that for the first time in generations in Western society, we're beginning to face discrimination and prejudice because of our faith. In many parts of Western culture, there are already laws and policies that not only challenge our religious freedom, but keep us from fully teaching the truth about what Jesus has said. This has left many Christians to feel isolated and alone in a society that doesn't understand or accept our beliefs. But as followers of Jesus, we have a unique opportunity because the Bible consistently tells us that it is in these times of adversity that our faith can grow, and it's during these times that our light can shine the brightest. So, we have a challenge. Are you ready? Let's dive in. This book will change your life. You just got to read it. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. As Matthew chapter 5 begins to draw to a close, he says in verse 43, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends his rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same?" So what Jesus is showing us here is even in the face of discrimination and prejudice, we can choose to do good and to love those who would not do good for us. This is not even the first time that he said this in the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 10, the text reads like this: "Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." This reminds me of the opening of the book of James when he says, "Count it all joy when you fall into difficult trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, and patience can have its perfect work." So what Jesus is telling us is not just love our enemies because they're there to love. What he's actually saying is it's good for us to love our enemies. When we meet their prejudice and discrimination, not with anger and resentment, but with kindness and love, then we're imitating the way that God met humanity. That's part of the thought that Paul is trying to express in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8, when he said he was hard pressed on every side, but wasn't crushed. He was perplexed, but he wasn't in despair. He was persecuted, but he wasn't abandoned. That he was struck down, but he wasn't destroyed. We can stand strong and persevere knowing that we are not alone in these struggles. So as we're embracing this idea that Jesus is teaching in Matthew chapter 5 and 44 that we should love our enemies, yes, we have to acknowledge that that's going to be difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. But as Christians, when we do that, we not only show that we are capable of being like God and that we want to be like God, but that we have a fully developed trust in him. Because what we're doing then is we're actually meeting hostility with the message of the kingdom and the light of the gospel. And that's one of the questions that I have for you that maybe you could answer in the comments, that what kinds of unkindness and prejudice and discrimination are you seeing because of your faith? Many of us are beginning to feel like we're not allowed to any longer fully participate in society. And this is particularly true for the youngest of us and the most vulnerable that are transitioning from childhood into young adulthood, that are just trying to kick off their lives, and they're trying to do so in a culture of corruption where ungodly influences surround them and they are singled out because they don't engage in those influences. We've lost this live and let live kind of mentality. But we don't have to despair. But it's not just the attitudes toward us that are changing. We also live in a world where institutionalized discrimination is becoming a very real thing. That there are Western countries where just teaching the truth about sin, no hatred, no judgment, but just teaching the truth about sin and sexuality will get you labeled and even potentially thrown in prison for warning people away from the devil and his work in their life. But not only are we seeing this institutionalized, we're seeing this as a cultural movement. It's really flowing out of our entertainment community. I have no doubt that you're aware of the cancel culture. Just for the sin of disagreeing with the majority, there's an entire segment of our culture that believes that you can be canceled and not allowed to participate as a functioning adult in society. It's not just your name is going to be smeared on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. Your job can be taken away from you. Now, when you aim this toward people of faith, it becomes very, very serious. We need to be aware that during these times when we are expressing our beliefs, it can make us a target for discrimination and attack. That's why in this particular environment and in this climate of cancellation, it is so important that we are pure reflections of Jesus, that we're doing our best to imitate him, because the world will be able to spot the hypocrisy. And for us as followers of Jesus, there are seasons of life that are coming where man's laws are going to be directly in conflict with the laws of God. That's why the example of the apostles in Acts chapter 4 and 5 is such an important example for the way that we can walk today. And that's why we also need to remember the words of the apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 6, where he urged them not to receive the grace of God in vain, and in every circumstance equip themselves with weapons of righteousness. He uses that metaphor again in the 10th chapter, where he says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ." This is all coming out of the thought that he began expressing over in chapter 4, verse 16, where he said, "Do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what we see is only temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. And of course, this just keeps going forward into chapter 5, where he urges them to walk by faith and not by sight. So where have you seen the erosion of religious liberty, and how are you dealing with it? What kind of plans are you making for the future when we may not be as free to talk about Jesus as we are presently? Leave some of this in the comments. And while you're doing that, you're going to go right by the like and subscribe button. If you want more of this kind of content, you need to hit both of those things. And I'm going to keep you posted on all of the things that I'm doing. We need to realize that in a society that doesn't understand or accept our belief in Jesus, that for many of us and for our brethren, there are going to be times when we feel alone and isolated. And as followers of Jesus, we've got to remember that we are never truly alone. I think that's why the 23rd Psalm is so precious to so many people, confidently saying, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Why? Because he's leading me to green pastures and beside still waters, and he's there with me, walking through the valley of the shadow of death. He provides for us. He guides us. Back to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, what is Paul talking about in verse 7? That he's got this treasure in earthen vessels, and that by that he's showing the surpassing power that is from God and not from us. That he's telling them that he could find comfort and strength in his faith and in his community of believers. When we're confident, then we have something precious in us. And by that precious thing, we are united to all of those who share in that belief. And we can find comfort and strength in our faith. There's a huge community of believers out there that we don't have to lose heart. And that's why in the 23rd Psalm, David is reminding us that God is with us, and Jesus taking on the name of that good shepherd in John chapter 10, when he says, "I am the good shepherd," he's taking that 23rd Psalm and he's applying it to himself. And that's why he could say in Matthew chapter 28 and 20 that he would be with them always, even unto the end of the age. And that is a source of great comfort for Christians. Worshiping and drawing near with other worshipers reminds us that we are not alone, and that we have one who is worthy to be worshiped. And I've got to tell you, if those thoughts are not first and foremost in our way of thinking, then we're going to be unprepared for what the devil is trying to do in this world. Look, friends, as we journey through this world, we're going to face many, many challenges. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And so I want to hear from you. What kind of strategies are you implementing in your daily life? What kinds of things are you doing to make sure your faith is staying strong? What kind of things are you doing for your family? This is what I really want to see in the comments. Let's approach our time here in the way that Peter recommended that we do so in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15. That when the world questions us, when the world doubts us, that we're able to give them a reason for the hope that's within us, that we can answer them with meekness and fear because we have put Jesus at the center of our lives, that he rules in our hearts, that we have fully submitted to him, because then we have a hope that's worth hanging on to. But I want you to remember, you can hold fast your hope. You don't have to give in to the darkness, and you can let Christ be the light that shines out of you. Until I talk to you again, have a good day, and God bless.